everybody. This meeting is being recorded. So come on in, join the chat. If you are joining us live, say hello, let us know where are you from. And what I have really been interested in learning in the very beginning of class is this your first class with me, or your first jewelry making class? Or are you an old hat by now? You've seen me so many times, you could probably give my spiel from in the beginning and in the end. So just let us know where you are. Oh my gosh, somebody is here from Dubai. That's really, really cool. Oh my gosh. I think that's the furthest and most exotic place that we have had join us in our Michael's classes. Well, while everybody is bopping on and letting me know where you're from, and then whether or not this is your first class or if you have taken many classes so far, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Meredith Roddy, and I work for Beadalon and Artistic Wire. We are the wire manufacturer in Pennsylvania. We sell a lot of our products through Michael's, of course, and I have been so just honored and tickled and just delighted to be able to teach the classes for the Michael's Community Classroom. So I see that a lot of people are old hats with me by now, but there are some first timers as well. So as I mentioned, this class is being recorded. So you can go back and watch all of my past classes that have been posted on the Michael's YouTube channel. So there are a couple of different ways to find that. And usually someone from Michael's, either Felicia or Laura, or maybe even Yvette, will post the links in the comments on where you can find that. But generally you go to michaels.com, go to the community classroom page, and then you can find all of my past classes, but also classes from all different makers across all different crafts. I've actually learned a ton from watching these Michael's classes as well. So even somebody who is teaching the classes is watching them as well. That's how good they are. And they're free, which is so just great for Michael's to do. So let's see. Today we are going to be learning, I'm calling it, what did I decide when I was walking the dog earlier and I came up with the most perfect name for this class, an introduction to advanced wire wrapping. So in some of the classes that I have done in the past, I've talked all about crimping. We've learned how to make wrapped loops. We've attached jump rings. We've worked with memory wire, all different kinds of projects. This one is taking our wire working, our skills to the next level. So with that as a little introduction, I'd like to give a couple of caveats. First of all, this could be a make along class. If you are it's the word that I'm looking for. If you are familiar with wire working techniques, you can make along with me. We should be able to get this all hammered out, pun intended, but we're not doing any hammering today, in about an hour. However, since this class is being recorded, you will be able to go back and watch all of the classes that you'll be able to watch this class, of course, all the other classes, but this class as well, over and over and over again to really get the techniques. Now, I mentioned this is an introduction to advanced wire wrapping. So wire wrapping can be very easy-ish. Well, let's rephrase that. Wire wrapping can be manageable and it can also be very intricate and very difficult. So hopefully today you will learn some of the beginning skills that you need, some of the vocabulary, definitely the tools, and some of the techniques to see kind of where you want to go with your wire wrapping, if this is a technique that you are interested in pursuing. So let's see, Yvette is here from Beadalon as well. She is in the chat room and she will be answering questions, posting links. She has already posted the instructions in a PDF document that everyone should have received if you have signed up for this class. I do know that if you're watching on your phone, that document won't show up. Sometimes people try to look for it when they're on their phones, but for whatever reason, through Zoom, through I don't know, technology, it's not coming through. But rest assured, the email either has been emailed to you with the instructions or will be after class. But not only that, I'm sorry, in the comments that we'll post as we go along each step. So hopefully that will be very helpful for going forward. Now, I'm hoping that it is my face talking to you that is on Spotlight right now and not, I'm not sure what I am seeing. There seems to be, I'm hoping that all of that was me talking at you, but if you were just looking at the tray, I do apologize. Let me just go ahead, since I now see myself here, and introduce myself and say, hi, my name is Meredith Roddy and I work for Beadalon and Artistic Wire. And today we are going to be making this little guy, this little Halloween themed pendant. But even though it's Halloween, all of the skills that we learned today are going to be transferable to really any pendant that you want to set in wire. So now I thank you. Okay, so Jean says, okay, that's fine. you don't need to see my face the whole time, but I do like kind of interacting in the very beginning, just telling everybody what's going on. So let's see. I think actually we're ready to flip back down and talk about our materials and our tools that we are going to need for class. So first things first, let's talk about wire. So we are going to need two types of wire. Now at Michaels and in the wire universe, there are a lot of different types of wire. What we are actually going to be using today is square wire and half round wire. Now these wires and these gauges are both available in Michaels stores, and they're a little different than perhaps the wire that you're used to using. Of course, we always use round, well, not always, but we often use round wire when we are doing wire work, when we're making links, when we're doing wire wrapping. But today we're actually going to be exploring with square wire and half round wire. And the gauges of wire that I'm using today are 22 gauge for each. There are several, I think there are a couple of different gauges of each of these available in Michaels. However, when I teach and when I am first learning a skill, I tend to go a little bit softer on my wire. So 22 gauge is going to be thinner and more malleable than 20 gauge or 18 gauge, and slightly harder and larger than 24 gauge. So the smaller the number, the thicker the wire. It can get very confusing, but a quick visual and a quick comparison usually sets everything straight. So this is a German style wire, which means it is a half hard wire. And it's a little tough to see here on the back, but on the packaging, we have this great scale that talks about up here, we've got full hard all the way down to dead soft wire. And German style is right about in, let me just double check and make sure, right about in here in the half hard. And what that means is it's going to be a little more springy, a little harder. There's really no other word to substitute to work with. If you are familiar with Artistic Wire, which is another brand, I'm just looking on my workspace to see if I have a spool. I'll grab that in a little bit. That's what I get for cleaning up before class. Artistic Wire is going to be more in a dead soft category. So it's going to be very, very easy to manipulate, very, very easy to bend. Not that this is hard or difficult to bend, it's just going to feel a little firmer as you're working it. And I find that in doing this technique, the German style wire is the perfect temper, that's the word that we use, the perfect temper for this kind of wire wrapping. So 22 and 22 gauge in the half round and in the square. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit more in a minute or two. And those are the supplies that we're going to need today, just those two different types of wires. So my pumpkin beads, right? How cute can you possibly get with pumpkin beads? This is what we are going to wrap. I thought it was fun in keeping with our theme of Halloween classes for Michaels this month, but you can use any cabochon, any stone, shaped stones. There are all different kinds of really anything that's flat and a shape and with a good amount of size will work with this technique. So we'll need something to wrap. I love these pumpkin beads. And then I just used a couple of these Swarovski crystals because I like to bling it up whenever I can for the little stem here on the pumpkin. So again, not a whole lot of materials needed for this project, but just very specific wires for this project. I wouldn't recommend doing this, especially if it's your first time, if you with round wire. Square wire is the way to go. And these are, what are these, 4mm? Yeah, these are 4mm Swarovski bicones. And if it, I don't want to say the wrong color. Let me make sure. Yep, fern green. I was right. Did you hear me kind of get to that fern? There's so many colors of Swarovski though. I hate getting them wrong. Okay, so let's talk about tools. So we've got some tools that are going to be in our standard tool kit, and then some kind of more specialized tools for this project. So the first one on the list in the instructions are our nylon jaw pliers. So we're going to be using these for any wire straightening that we need for our class today. We also, of course, will need some chain nose pliers. And let's see, I was using my chain nose pliers for a different project, but you guys all know, okay, there. You guys all should know what chain nose pliers look like by now. Oh, they're right in my hand right here. Oh my goodness, Meredith. Is it going to be that kind of a day? You can tell I'm a little bit nervous about teaching this class, but I think we're gonna be just fine. So we've got pliers here, and then I also really like using bent chain nose pliers when I'm doing this kind of wire work. And you can see the difference between the chain nose pliers and the bent chain nose pliers pretty easily. And once we get to actually doing the wire wrapping part, you'll see why these bent chain nose pliers are a great way to go. Okay, so next we're going to need our round nose pliers, and these will look familiar to everyone. I always have a little black mark on my round nose pliers because that's where I like to make my loops. Then of course we always need a cutter. These are the sparkle cutters. They're a nice semi-flush cutter. We'll talk about that, what that means in a little bit. And that, last but not least, this is a Beadalon tool, but this tool exists in Michaels as well. It is a stepped bail making plier. This guy will come in very handy for when we are using the, when we are making our bail. And Michaels's tool is called this triple bail forming plier. So it's the same general idea, and you can see all of these different barrels that are really helpful in making different sized loops and or curved parts. So that will be for our last step, making the bail. Okay, and then of course, my most important tool, my glasses. So they're going on now. I think I need to wipe them off really quickly. They get a little dusty down here in the basement studio. Okay, so we went over our tools, we went over our materials, and these beads are, gosh, it doesn't say. I think that there was a note that came in here about, okay, these are 25mm beads in the round. You can, like I said, we're learning a technique today. We're making a project, but we're really learning how to do a wire wrapped bezel for a stone, for a cabochon, for you. And you could really even use a bead for this as well. I mean, these are beads just because they happen to be drilled. I've done this technique with all different kinds of things. And it is something that has taken me a lot of practice. So don't feel if this is something you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do this so badly, and everything is fumbly, everything is fiddly. You'll see as I go along, I fumble and fiddle too. This is definitely a technique that takes patience and precision. And we can do an over under for how many times I'm going to say small incremental movements during this class. But I think that is all of the introductory information that I need to go over. So let's get right into it. 15 minutes in, we'll get right into it. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to cut 5 pieces of the square wire. And we're going to make those pieces 8 inches long. So I have actually gone ahead and cut several and also an extra or 2. So I have my 5 square wires already cut. The next we're going, and let me just mention really quickly, let's see, we're going to challenge my focal zoom on my camera today to see how close we can get. You can see that the wire is square. You can see those nice reflective surfaces. And the reason why we use square wire is because we're lining it up next to each other. And round wire is not going to line up next to each other easily. It's going to slip off of itself. It's not going to want to stay together just because those round edges are going to keep slipping against each other. But with square wire, you are able to line each of the wires up next to each other to create this, what is the word I'm looking for? This cage for this bead. Okay, so this is where the square wire comes in, right here on the edges here. Now, these little wraps, let's see how close we can get on those little wraps. There we go. These little wraps, this is what the half round wire is for. Okay, so what we're doing, just to kind of get your head wrapped around the project today, we are going to wrap the half round wire around the square wire. So just to kind of give you a sense of where we're going and where these things are heading. Okay, so here we have our 5 8-inch pieces of square wire. And now what we need to do is cut 4 4-inch pieces of the half round wire. So I happen to already have a little half round wire out here. And pro tip, I haven't marked this bag yet, but it is a good practice to get into when you are done with a project where you're using a specific gauge of wire. Put it in its own baggie and mark the number or the gauge of the wire. You could also just use the back tag or the packaging, the piece of cardboard, but if you don't want it to be too bulky, you can recycle that. And then I just write on the baggies with a Sharpie or a permanent marker so that I know what gauge it is, because especially when you start getting into square and half round wire, I find it very difficult to just eyeball the gauges. I'm pretty good when it comes to round wire, but I am definitely not as good when it comes to the square and the half round. Okay, so what I've done here on 4 of my half round pieces is I have used my chain nose pliers. You can use really any pliers that's going to make a bend, and I'm making a 90-degree bend, but I need to make sure that 90-degree bend is happening so that the flat side of that half round wire is on the inside. So it's really easiest to see on the package. Half of the wire is flat and half is round, hence the name half round, right? Makes sense. And when you're wrapping, that flat side is what is going to lay against your square wire to hold it in place. So you want to make sure that flat side is on the inside. And it can be a little difficult to see the difference, but if you do it wrong, it's pretty obvious when you bend it. It's just not going to look quite right. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do, it's not really the first thing anymore, is it? But the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to take these 5 wires and put them right next to each other. Now, if your wires are bent or wonky, that's where this guy comes into place. This is the nylon jaw plier, and it makes short work of any bends or blemishes in the wire. It also serves to do something called work harden, which is it's exactly what it sounds like. It hardens the wire so it's not quite as soft. I like to either use sometimes I have been known to use my fingers for this step, but the nylon jaw pliers not only saves your fingers, but it also does a great job. I just need to bop this back just a little bit. And it's okay if your wires still have that natural curve in them. When you take it off of the spool, they will be curved. And since we're making a round shape, I generally just leave that curve in because it helps the wire keep that shape. There's no reason to take it out of shape and then put it back into shape again. All right, so now what I do is I just kind of with my fingers come in here and allow the wires, the square sides to find each other. So again, you can use the nylon jaw plier to smooth anything out that needs to be smoothed out. But these, because they're square, the sides are going to find each other and want to line up in a nice uniform way. If I was using round wire, these would be slipping all over the place and they wouldn't want to come together. They're almost one piece now because they're square and each of the sides are abutting against each other. So I want to generally keep these even on either side, and they're not totally even, and that's fine. And one thing that I did not mention that I want to mention several times is it's always better to start with way more wire than you think you need. This is way more wire than I think I need, but you can't add wire. You can always take a little bit off of each side, but you can't really add wire in this technique. So always good to start with more. Okay, so this is where my bent chain nose plier comes into place, because what that jaw of the bent chain nose plier allows is I can hold on to this wire, but the tip isn't getting in the way. So if I was holding the wire like this, you can see how the tip really, I'm going to have to kind of work around this tip. Whereas with the bent chain nose pliers, the tip is well out of the way. So I have a lot more room to work here. And you'll see why that's important in just a moment. Okay, so I have my little 90-degree angle, half round wire. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this half round wire around my square wire. And this is the 5 square wires all together. And depending on how thick or thin your cabochon, your bead, your stone is, that will determine how many wires you use. I usually use either 3, 4, or 5. I've not been ambitious enough to wrap something really, really thick before, or maybe that will be my challenge to myself for the afternoon after I'm having lots of good practice with all of these wraps. Okay, so I did mention in the beginning that this is a small incremental movement project where each movement is going to be small and precise. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top here and make sure we can both see what's going on. And I'm going to pull it down so that it is flat against those 5 wires. And I'm going to use my pliers I think I'm going to use my pliers to flatten it flat. And you can see just in me showing that everything kind of scotched out of the way. So all I need to do is just make sure that everything is still the way it should be. And I think I used the word fiddly before also. This first step right here is definitely the fiddliest. So I'm actually going to turn this over because I think I'm going to have a little bit better purchase this way. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to bend one of these wires. Hold on 1 second, friends. Let me just make sure that I've got this going the way it needs to be. Okay, I'm going to bend one of these wires straight up and one of these wires straight down. Because what I'm doing is I'm making this 4 wrap. Okay, so this is what we're doing as our first step. We're making that wrap. So I have just made my first wrap. I'll show everybody. Okay, and now we need to do the next part. So I'm going to use my chain nose pliers and bend my wire, my round, flat, half round wire against that square wire. And after every bend that I make, I come in with my pliers and I flatten it down. Because what you'll see when you do this is it is very easy to have extra space in here. This wire doesn't necessarily want to wrap this way. So if you've seen some classes that I've done before, I'll say things like those seed beads really want to come up on the needle. This wire doesn't necessarily really want to wrap very tight. So we have to coax it. We have to cajole it. We have to remind it that it wants to behave. Okay, so now I've gone around 3 times and I'm actually going to go around 1 more time and I'm going to explain why in just a second. So here is my last time. And you need to make a decision which part you want to be the front and which part you want to be the back. So my back, or I'm sorry, not the front, the back, the inside and the outside. That's a better way of saying it. So where did my little, oh, we'll just take another one. So of course, because my curve is coming this way, this is going to be my inside. And why that's important is because I want both of my tails tucked in on the inside. Now you can say that's not happening right now, but I want to explain why, because this is really important. So let's see how close we can get. If you can see right here, the first wrap here where my awl is just bumped out ever so slightly. Now, it's hard to see on the video, but when you do this, it is one of those things, at least for me, that is a huge pet peeve. It's like a pebble in your shoe. So I actually unwrap that first one here so that I can have a nice tight wrap instead of having that little bump out. So I'm going to pull it out a little bit and then retighten it. But then now in the back, it's a little messed up. So that's why I went around that other time. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps here. And if they're not exactly perfect, I see how I just come in right in again with those bent chain nose pliers and I just show that wire where I want it to go. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to snip the tails of the wire so that when I fold it over to finish my wrap, each of those tails comes about halfway. So I did say in the beginning, this is definitely beginning advanced. So there's a lot going on, but stay with me. We're going to do this 2 more times and then we'll get it. Okay. So once again, square wire wrapped with half round wire. My tails are tucked in and the wraps are really nice and tight against the end. So my advice is for starting out, take some square wire and just practice these wraps over and over and over again until you have them perfect. And then you will be happy. Because this is the part that really it gives people the most trouble, but also I think is the most satisfying when you finally get it. Now, time for the next wrap. So I'm just making sure that my wires are sitting next to each other the way that I want them to. Again, this isn't I find, not sure if everybody else finds this, but when I do this kind of wire work, I find that my wires are never quite as cooperative as I want them to be. Perhaps because they know that this is not my absolute favorite technique. I would much rather do a seed bead bezel around a bead or a cab like this any day. The wire might know that, but I am going to show it who is boss regardless. So just like I did on that first wrap, I have my 5 wires. I'm making sure that they are sitting next to each other as much as I can get them to be. And it looks like this one wire here is on a diagonal. And I'm not 100% sure why that is happening, but I think it is going to right itself after this step, and then we will be in good shape. Okay, center of the frame, Meredith. Okay, so once again, I'm going to fold that wire in half, the half round wire in half over the square wire. And I just realized that I do this. I fold it in half and then I switch it around so that I'm grabbing it. When I fold it toward myself, but then when I do the next step, I have the plier or the tails facing the other way. And I think that that's actually a good lesson in figuring out what works best for you. There are a ton of techniques, of teachers, of ways of doing these kinds of wraps. Some people use masking tape to hold the wires in place as they're working. I don't use that because I don't like having a sticky residue on my wire, but this is really one of those things that you will find the best way to hold it. You'll find the best tools. Maybe the bent chain nose pliers, maybe you're like, this is not working for me at all, but the flat nose pliers, those work perfectly. Go ahead and use those if that is something that is going to make your wire working more enjoyable. I have definitely seen people do this technique differently than I do. And there are actually also special tools that you can use that really help with that first bend. But if you don't have a special tool for that first bend, making your half round wire just that little bit longer really, really helps with getting that first bend nice and tight. You can see I have a lot of extra wire here, but so much better, especially when you're first learning, to use a little bit more wire than a little bit less wire. Because if you use a little bit less wire, more often than not, you will end up actually wasting more wire because you will have to cut double. All right, so let's see here. Going to bend that one in and bend that one in. And that one is just a little long. Okay, I want it to be just a little bit shorter. So I'm going to very gently, very gently pull that up and snip a little bit more off. Okay. And then after every wrap, I like to breathe a sigh of relief and put it down and give my back a little stretch, because what you'll find is at least for me, I get real hunched over and real kind of scrunched up when I'm working on this kind of wire wrapping. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of your body and not damaging any of your muscles or ligaments or anything. A good habit to get into for any beading at all is taking breaks and stretching. So, and also what I need to be more disciplined about is examining my work. So here I'm just double checking everything, making sure my wraps are nice. And now I'm ready to do the next one. So looking at my example here, I have one wrap on the bottom, one on the side, and one on this side. So depending on how big your stone is or what shape your stone is, you might have 4 wraps, and then they would be kind of 2 and 2, or you might have 5 wraps. You might want to do your wraps closer together. Again, all design elements, but also structural. So wire wrapping really is an art, because there's a lot of kind of making it up as you go along, for lack of a better word. Okay, so now I am going to straighten those wires against each other, and it does look like the that wire that was a little bit twisted straightened itself out. So that makes me very happy. But a good lesson also to remember and to realize that you want to be cognizant that your wires are in fact all next to each other, and not twisted. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is pull that wire down, and I could have done that with a tool, but I do sometimes like to really get in and feel the way that the wire is working with my fingers. And as I did on the other one, I just turn this all the way over. It's just what works best for me to get that next wrap. And you'll notice I haven't said yet that this is the hardest part. For those of you who have watched many of my classes, there's always one place that I mentioned that is the hardest part of the project. You might have thought that this is it. It is not, which is why I suggested definitely practice this part. And then your wraps will just get better and better and better every time you do them. And I definitely can say that from experience. And you want them to be tight. You don't want them moving around at all. And you can see every time I go around once, I do, let's say I do a quarter bend and then another quarter bend. And then I move some of this stuff out of the way to really highlight what's happening here. So each time I do a quarter bend and then another quarter bend, and then I flatten the half round wire against the square wire. So let's see, that is 4. But again, I have my little bump out right there. So I'm going to unwrap this one. And if you can't get that bump out by doing it this way, unwrap the whole thing, right? Why not? Just unwrap the whole thing and bring this one around one more time. And again, a quarter turn, a press, a quarter turn, and I want to make sure I have 4, 4, and 4 in all of my places. I'm going to turn this over and trim it. And if you did only 3 wraps, or you did 5 wraps, or your wraps are uneven, just go ahead and take them out. It's no big deal. We're putting all of this time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears into this project. You want to make sure that it is going to be looking the way that you want it to. Okay, so let's see, what do we have here? So we've done that. I now have 3 wraps. This one isn't quite pressed down enough, so I'm just going to come back in here. And again, small incremental movements. Now what we need to do is to turn this kind of semicircle, half circle, into a circle to go around this pumpkin. So there are a couple of different suggestions that I have, because you really want to make sure that you don't get this so bent out of shape that that all of this hard work is wasted. So very, very small. You can use the pumpkin bead or the cab or whatever it is as your template. You can use your fingers to wrap it around, but I find using a little spice jar, a pill bottle. In this case, I'm using just a little container that I picked up along the way, that I keep beads in. It's kind of whatever I have in my studio that's the right size, I like to use for a mandrel. And there are man-made mandrels that serve the same purpose. But this is one of those times that that you just want to take it nice and slow. And sometimes not sometimes, the heat from your hands from working this too can also sometimes really help get that wire nice and bendable. And that this is also why I like using the 22 gauge wire when we're first starting to learn, because a 20 gauge wire or an 18 gauge wire, while it's more substantial, is going to be a little bit harder to move. And I know when I'm first learning a technique, I want it to be as easy as possible. I don't want to be struggling with my materials. I want to be learning the skill. So we're going to come here and again, just slow, incremental, steady as she goes movements. So now, as we are getting this around in a circle, the next step is to bring all 10 of these wires together at the top. So I have one that's kind of a work in progress here, because what I'm doing is I'm going to be bringing all of these wires, let's get a little closer here, together at the top. Okay. And that is also not the hardest part of the project, but we're getting there. So again, just real small movements. And hopefully I don't do anything crazy, like put a terrible bend in this wire that I don't want. But once again, that is where our trusty nylon jaw pliers come into place. If we're a little bit zealous, or overzealous, I should say, in our bending, you can generally undo that mistake. So once I get this to about how I want it, what I need to do is bend both sets of wires up at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so right now my pumpkin looks kind of like, I don't know what he looks like, but he's got some funny hair going on. And you can use your bent chain nose pliers for this. You can use your regular chain nose pliers. I actually find using my flat nose pliers to be my favorite way of doing this. And what I'm doing is I'm grabbing all 5, or I shouldn't say all 5, the 5, just 5, not all 10, but 5 that are facing away from me. And I'm grabbing them right about where the hole is, which is going to be my halfway part. It's a little hard to see, but and I'm just going to go ahead and bend those wires toward me. See how I'm using my finger here as leverage to bend it against. I'm going to bend that up at about 90 degrees. And then once again, I'm just going to double check and triple check and quadruple check and a gazillion times check. This is a lot of checking to make sure that I have done a good job of my measuring. So now I need to go ahead and do the same thing with these wires. So once again, I'm going to hold this in place. I'm going to come around, and this time I want to grab it just to the other side of where my first bend was. Let's make sure everybody can see, including me. And then I'm going to bend it back up. Okay. And now I'm going to place everything down, take a sip of water and a deep breath. So I'm curious so far, everybody is very quiet in the rooms. I would love to know if anybody has done this before and if I am making it look more intimidating or more manageable. Excuse me. All right, so once again, I'm just kind of double and triple and quadruple checking here. And it looks like I did a pretty good job here of bringing everything together. If I hadn't done that, again, all is maybe not lost. I might be able to straighten some stuff out either with my fingers or with a nylon jaw pliers. But sometimes we learn from our mistakes and we just kind of start over again. I have a lot of half finished and semi-finished wire wrapped projects that I just couldn't I couldn't do it anymore. Okay. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm just using my best tools as my fingers to take that bend out of these wires. They had that curve from their packaging in them, and I don't need that curve or want that curve in anymore. I could come in here with these pliers as well, but I want to make sure that I don't pull any of these wires out of the wrap. So you just want to be really careful if you start pulling on these rather than just kind of using your fingers to straighten everything out. Okay. So I probably check this way more than I may perhaps need to, but it's always a good double. It just makes me feel more confident in my wire work. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to bind all 10 of these wires together. And as promised, this is the hardest part. So if you can do this, and if you got all of this and you stay with me, you will be fine for this project. But I'm very honestly, this is the part that I struggle with the most, and the part that other people I see struggle with the most also. So the easiest way that I have found for me to do this is by making it easier on myself, right? I don't want this to be hard. I don't want this to be a struggle. So the easiest thing to do for me is to take a piece of scrap wire and just wrap it around the top. I don't even really worry about what's going on with these wires. I just want them to be a little bit more together. When they're all frayed out like that, I find it even more difficult to wrap this part together. But before I start wrapping, I do have to do one thing before I do that. And that is to create the cage part, right? Because if I just have it round like this, there's nothing holding my bead or my pendant in here. He's just going to fall out. So what I need to do is I need to make the little bezel part, the little cage, the trying to think of a cute word for it, to be able to keep him in. And this is where you can really have some fun. So you can see I did one that's pretty symmetrical, and then one totally not symmetrical. And depending on your fancy, what you're feeling that day, this is where you can shine. Sometimes the wire will tell you how it wants to go. Sometimes you might not even have a choice of where that wire wants to go. So to do this, you want to make sure of a couple of things. And this is definitely a time that some things could go wrong. And I'm going to mention what they are so you'll know to look out for them. It is very easy to nick and mar your wire when you're doing this step. Maybe generally you don't want that to happen, but in the beginning it will happen. And even after tons and tons of practice, it could still happen, which is why you want to take it really slow, make very, very small movements, and use the very tip of your bent chain nose pliers is what I have found to be the easiest way to do that. Okay. So what I'm doing, there are 5 square wires here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the rightmost wire and I'm going to twist it so that it bends like that. Okay. It's a lot of words. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's make sure that we can all see what's happening. I'm going to grab just the very first wire and I am ever so gently pulling it out and twisting it. See how I did that? I slipped off because I was looking up at my screen instead of my work. So you don't want to do that. You want to really make sure that you are taking it nice and slow and steady to get that wire bent out of shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that here, here, and here, and then on the back as well, because what this is doing is it's creating a frame for my bead. So again, you just want to hold it at the very, very end and the very tip of your pliers and just ever so gently move that wire in and out of the way. You don't want to grab onto the middle 3 wires. You're just taking the top wire here and then the bottom wire here. Okay. So I've done my bottom 2 and they're not perfect and they're not symmetrical. I'm not going to worry about that quite yet. I will worry about that in a moment. I'm going to come up here and do the same thing. I'm going to push that down here. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And you see how I keep rotating this piece in my hands? I'm moving it all around. I'm looking for where I can get the best purchase and the best grip for where I want to go. So I'm not, holding it in one place and then trying to move my hand in an uncomfortable way. I'm just taking it nice and slow and moving those wires. Oh, I've got one more to do. And just make sure I've got it. And I like doing this part before I bind it up here because it gives me just a little bit of extra wire to work with. Because since we're kind of moving these out of place, they're going to slide down a little bit. And I need that extra wire to work with. Now, I have now moved each of the wires out of place. And so if I want them to be symmetrical front to back, this is where I can kind of play around with what I want these wires to look like. Do I want them to be pointy? Do I want them to be less pointy? What do I want them to look like? It's kind of fun, right? I'm not going to worry about fiddling with them too much for our tutorial today. And if for any reason this has gotten way out of shape, just kind of, again, push everything where it needs to go. Okay, so now I'm still kind of flat this way. What I need to do is I need to open up each of those bends so that my pumpkin can slide in comfortably. So again, this is where these bent chain nose pliers come in really handy. I'm going to insert, let's see if I can show that really well. I'm going to insert them in between and open it up. So it's kind of like a reverse. Instead of squeezing something, I'm inserting it and opening it up. So I'm just going to do that super gently on all 4 of those bends. And last one. And now I have made enough room to be able to, if I need to kind of scooch this part up so that I can get this in a little bit more comfortably. Or you know what? If it needs to come all the way off, it comes all the way off. Because we can just put that messy bend back in after I've gotten my pumpkin in. And if for any reason any of these bends aren't big enough for my pumpkin to slide into, I did a pretty good job there, but I can just pop him off and then come back in and open it up a little bit more if I need to. But I really like doing all of that step with the wires closed. I think that it yields a nicer result. And so now I can come in and test my pumpkin. Once again, how many times have we tested our pumpkin, right? But he looks like he's pretty happy in there. He's nestled. He's not going anywhere. Try to shake him out. He is definitely nice and secure. So now we're going to do the top binding. And once again, I just want to make sure that all of my wires are nice and together. And I'm going to go ahead and just put that. I'm going to use another piece of scrap wire and just wrap all of these together. It just makes it so much easier for me when I don't have those wires kind of flying all over the place. Okay, so now I need to do a wrap here. Now, you could do a messy wrap and not really worry about having all of those wires next to each other, but that wouldn't be a very educational class, would it? So let's go ahead and really talk about a couple of tips and tricks to get these wires to be exactly where they need to be. And once again, this is where our patience comes, because they don't really necessarily want to all be next to each other, right? So one thing that you can do is wrap them again in a nice tight wrap right here so that they all are next to each other. I am not going to do a nice tight wrap. I'm going to do a messy, let's get on with the class kind of wrap. But you could very easily do a nice tight wrap just to give yourself a little bit of extra practice. Because like I said, these wires, unfortunately, don't want to behave. They don't want to cooperate. They're kind of like an unruly puppy. I was going to say an unruly toddler, but now I have them tamed. So I'm going to do that same thing on the next one. And maybe as you're going along, your wires are behaving a little bit better than mine are today, right? But it's good to know some troubleshooting for if you get to this point and you've done all the work and yet somehow, for whatever reason, your wires are just not cooperating. So I have my 4 together and my 4 together, and now I'm going to put, my 5 together and my 5 together. And now I'm going to put all 10 together. So I'm just doing this totally messy because I want my final result to be really nice. So again, I mentioned in the beginning that this was it's definitely a slow and steady project. But if you take all of the right steps and make sure that you are still in frame, everything should come together at the end. Okay, so a little bit better. We're getting there. So I think now I'm ready to try this part here. Remember how I said it was the hard part? So once again, I have that half round wire and I have it bent at a 90-degree angle. And my goal is to get all 10 of these wires nicely lying or standing side by side. And I might achieve that goal. I might get close to that goal, but just like we did before, we are going to each and every time quarter turn and flatten it on the side. And that flattening of this on the side will also work to get all of those wires to come together. This is also kind of a, you got to have faith kind of a thing. But again, slow and steady. Sometimes I like to turn my chain nose pliers one way or the other way to see if they are going to work better. Sometimes you need to get in there real tight and close. Other times it's better to have a little bit more, more surface area to work with. And you can also use the pliers to make a nice tight pull. And you can see, let's see, how close can we get? You can see now that this, it is starting to all come together because I prepared for it and I allowed that wire to go exactly where I wanted it to go. And so because I started wrapping up, I'm going to try to get this just a little bit tighter on the bottom as well with that with that bottom wire. But once it starts flaying out, I know that I have reached the end. All right, can you all breathe a sigh of relief with me? We got here, we did it. The hard part is over. Now I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna snip the bottom and I'm going to snip the top. And I've got one going on one side and one going on the other. And this is all going to be hidden by the little swirls and the curly cues that we do, but we still want it to be nice. Yes. Thank you. Cindy gave me a big sigh. I know, right? All right, so now all we need to do with all of this garbage at the top is just pull it off. If it doesn't pull off right away, just very carefully snip it. And then let's put that down, give her back a little stretch. Okay, so now we have all of our wires done, and it is time to make the bail. It's funny, I just realized that in my instructions, I wrote it for 2 on the side, and in my project sample, I did it 2 on the side, but then in this project, I did it 3 on the side. So you can see it's a little bit heavier there on the side on the one over here where I did 3, and a little bit heavier on the top. But as long as those wires are covering as much of that side as you want, I could have done 1 if I wanted to. But you can see the difference between the 2 and the 3. Technique is exactly the same. All right, so now, much like our bends here, the bail is where you really get to have some nice creative freedom. So my bails, I find, even when I start with an idea in mind, always end up different than what I set out to do. And I think that that is a lot of the fun of this kind of project. The first step that I always do, though, is I separate my wires back again. So we went to all of that effort to get them to be together and standing next to each other so that we could wrap them nice and tight at the bottom. But now what we need to do is separate them out again. And once again, this is a very kind of, let's take it nice and slow and make sure that we don't bend our wires the wrong way or to the wrong side. And let's see, I'm just kind of separating them because now what I'm going to do is try to kind of figure out what, what I want to do with them all, right? So the first thing I need is some sort of a loop to hang something off of. So, and once you have that loop, everything else becomes decorative. And this loop can be done a ton of different ways. You could use one wire like I have done here and what I'm going to demonstrate. You could use several wires. You could use all of the wires. That will be kind of the next iteration of this class, is all different kinds of fun ways to make bails after you have done the wrapping portion. So I'm going to take, let's see, I'm going to take, since we have an even number here on either side now, I'm going to take 1, 2 front and 1, 2 back and work with this one as my loop. I'm going to take 1, 2 back front here and 1, 2 back here and work with this one as my loop as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use both of these as a loop, and I'm going to make this one turn this way and this one turn the opposite way, so that I have, it's going to be nice and it's going to be secure. So I could use a couple of different tools for this. I could use my bail making pliers, or I could use my round nose pliers, whichever one is easier. So I'm going to try it first. Let's see, how am I feeling here today? I think I'm feeling maybe a little round nose plier action. And I'm going to put that down as close as I can get. And I'm going to bend this over this way. And then I'm going to do the same thing of repositioning my tool. And just want to make sure everybody can see what's happening here. And kind of go over this way. And I'm going to trim these ends a little bit. I'm always very hesitant to trim my ends when I get to this point. In fact, I have lots of things that I've bezeled that just look like this because I haven't decided what I want to do with all of the finishing. And I'm always very hesitant to finish it off. But in the interest of time and decision making, I'm going to keep one of these long so that I remember that I want to use it to make my little pumpkin's hat right here, the stem with my crystals. And then I'm going to just go ahead. I'm going to do it. Not sure what's going to end up happening, but I'm going to trim these all. Wish me luck, everybody. We're cutting them. We're throwing caution to the wind and we are trimming our ends. Whew, that was stressful, but sometimes you just have to cut. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm just going to bend these in different ways. You could make them even, you could make them uneven, you can turn them into coils. Maybe we'll kind of make this one a little bit more of a curly Q. It's really, this is again one of those places that you can even just cut them off too if you want. So that one's a little more that way. I like kind of doing, I don't know, it's just, it's fun. And then this becomes kind of that top of the pumpkin that's almost like where you would cut out to make it into a jack-o'-lantern. Yeah, we're just going to keep on coiling, keep on turning over just for fun. And you want to make sure that the ends, since they are going to be a little rough, that they're going to be tucked in toward the toward the stone. And again, if you're not making it look like a pumpkin, I have a really pretty necklace that I made when I used a heart bead in this technique. And so I brought these down so it actually looked like an upside down heart. All right, so before I get to this part, I just want to take these two in the middle and just make them a little bit more finished. I'm gonna kind of bring that in and around. Let's see, you can see I'm just kind of letting the wire both be guided by and guiding it with my tools. Maybe the bent chain nose plier is the right tool for this job. Maybe I need to trim it a little bit more. Maybe the chain nose plier is the right tool for this job. I'm just kind of making an opportunity here to be able to put a ring or a cord, or even I could even crimp some beading wire to this and turn it into a beaded necklace as well. Okay, so maybe it got a little flatter than I want. I can come in here with my round nose pliers. It's really kind of then it becomes, you know, carte blanche. You can do whatever you want with it. So last step is, let's see, I did 4 of these little 4mm fern green Swarovski crystals. So let me top out 4. And I like that the, since we're using 22 gauge square wire, it goes onto the 4mm crystals pretty nicely, or the 4mm crystals go onto it pretty nicely. And then what I did on the end here is I made just a little curly cue with the end of the wire, just to really kind of get into that spirit of perhaps what a curly cue on the pumpkin might look like. So because I have such a long piece of wire here, all I'm going to do is hold my round nose pliers here and just kind of work around kind of in an opposite sort of a way. Take my pliers out, bring it back around again, just to make a fun little curly cue. And if the end of your wire is a little too rough for whatever reason, all you need to do is hit it with a nail file or a jewelry file just to take that rough end down a little bit. So, and now that looks kind of silly, right? So let's go ahead and just kind of bend it over so it actually looks like the top of a pumpkin. That's what we're making here today, a pumpkin. Oh my gosh, how cute and how fun is that? It almost looks like the top of Cinderella's pumpkin carriage, right? And the very top here, with the way I kind of got those funny little loops coming down. I really like this. And you could definitely, the silver wire is what I used here in our project, but you could make this, you can embellish this with all different colors of wire if you want. You could do a little coil of green wire at the top. I could spend the next 10 minutes talking about all of the different variations and all of the different ways to make this project. But all you would need to do next to turn it into a necklace is to untangle the cord from your sample. And all I did is I just added a jump ring and then a piece of, this is the cording, I think it's 1.7mm cording. For Michael's, you could use leather. Like I said, you could use bead stringing wire. Just a million different possibilities for turning this little pendant into a necklace. Oh my goodness. Big, deep sigh for everybody for sticking in there. This was definitely a doozy of a project. Felicia, I think I am ready for the front facing camera. Thank you. So thank you very much for sticking with me. That was a big one. And we'll do a little bit more in the coming months on some even more advanced wire wrapping techniques. As we are heading into November, Beadalon and Michaels has a lot of very exciting classes, and I've actually just done my December classes as well, which I'm so excited about. You guys are going to love it. So make sure that you go back to the Michaels Community Classroom and watch past classes if you've missed those, and be sure to sign up for the next classes as well. And very special treat in November and December, we have our very own Yvette, who is usually behind the scenes, coming in front of the camera to teach an incredibly cool technique that she has perfected that I think everyone is going to love as well. So those classes will be 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday afternoons. Make sure that if you make this project, definitely post it in all of the socials and do a hashtag make it with Michaels, and then also hashtag make it with Beadalon, because we love seeing what everybody makes from our Michaels classes as well. So follow us on all of the socials, and until next time, happy beading.